Masechet Kiddushin, Daf Chaftet. We've been talking about various methods of acquisition for people, slaves, and property, land. And so now we begin a new Mishnah on that topic. Reshut HaGavoa bechesef u'reshut HaHedyot bechazaka. Amidato lagavoa kemesirato lahedyot. Acquisition to Gavoa, meaning consecrating something, donating something to the Bet HaMikdash, works in a different way, and it's much easier to acquire something on behalf of the temple than for regular cases. So here's two examples regarding the authority of Gavoa, that means of the Bet HaMikdash, to acquire. We're talking about movable objects. They can do it with money, whereas for the authority, for a lay authority, it has to be by physical possession. We saw that already. In order to acquire a movable item, one has to pull on it or pick it up. We're calling that chazakah here, even though in the previous context, chazakah meant land, that you use the land. But here we're talking about movable objects. So while money does not finalize an acquisition, does not cause a trigger transfer regarding movable items for regular people, it does for the Bet HaMikdash. And furthermore, speaking in terms of Gavoa, is the same as handing off something for Hedyot. So if someone says, I consecrate this item, I donate it to the Bet HaMikdash, just saying it, makes the Bet HaMikdash already own it, even if the treasurer or representative of the Bet HaMikdash has not yet taken possession of it. It already is theirs, and so you cannot renege on that donation. Good. Gemara will elaborate. Tenor Banan. Kesad reshut hagavoa bechesef kizba shenatan ma'ot bibhema afilu behema besof haolam kana ubehedyot lo kana ad sheyimshoch. So how does it work? What's an example where the authority of the Bet HaMikdash can be effectuated just by money? If the treasurer of the Bet HaMikdash pays money for an animal. The Bet HaMikdash has to buy animals all the time for its usage. For, let's say, Korban Tamid, they'll take Machasita Shekel, they'll go to a farmer, and they'll say, we want to buy this animal. So once he gives the money, even if the animal is not present there, it could be on the other side of the world, and so obviously the temple treasurer did not pull on the animal, the acquisition is done. That animal belongs to the Bet HaMikdash. Whereas for a commoner, giving over the money does not transfer ownership. Only pulling on it transfers ownership. What's the example of the second law in the Mishnah that speaking for in terms of a donation is like transferring for a commoner? Bait ze hekdesh. Afilu besof haolam kana ubhedyot lo kana ad shimshoch veyachazik. If someone says this ox will be an olah offering, or this house will be hekdesh, these are different types of offerings, right? Because shor ze olah gives it intrinsic holiness that it can be sacrificed. This house is hekdesh. The Bet HaMikdash is probably not going to go and take the house and move it or move in to it, but rather he's going to donate the value of the house and he'll redeem it with money. Both types of donation work, effectuate the transaction just by words, whereas for a commoner, a person would have to pull on that ox or go and live in the house or lock the door in order to acquire it. Mishacho be'maneh velo ispik liftoto ad shamad be'matayim noten matayim ma'itama v'natan hakesef v'kam lo. And so we'll see some effects of this law where it will make a practical difference. If a commoner pulls on an animal that's worth 100 dinar, and a sanctified animal, meaning this animal sanctified for its money, and now I want to redeem it. So I'm pulling on the animal, showing my intention that I am going to acquire it with money. But let's say it took me a little time to get the money together, and so I didn't redeem it with the money. And in the meantime, the price went up from 100 to 200. So how much do I have to give? The answer is 200. Why? Because the pasuk says, and when he gives the money, then it will be transferred over to him. It's only when he gives the money that's when the transfer is finalized. So we see here that not doing meshicha on a sanctified animal while doing meshicha on a common animal, that's it. That would be, we agreed on 100. I pulled it. It would be mine. And the money would be in, something that I owe you. I have to give you eventually, right? But if I pulled it at 100 you were a commoner and this was a regular animal, then that would be the sticking price. Whereas for the Bet HaMikdash gets the benefit of the higher price, and that's going to be the theme throughout. The Bet HaMikdash always gets the benefit of a change. So the opposite case where I pull a sanctified item, it's worth 200, and so my pulling, and that again shows my intention that I'm going to redeem it, and now it's worth 200. So I'm committing myself to pay 200 here. But by the time I got the money together, the price went down. It's only 100. I still have to pay the Bet HaMikdash 100. Bet HaMikdash always wins, right? The house always wins. Because the power of a commoner should not be greater than that of Hekdesh. If it was a case of a commoner and I just took your regular animal and I pulled it because we agreed on a price of 200 and I pull it, even if I don't pay you, and the price goes down, I still have to pay you that original price. The price at the pulling is the agreed upon price. And so Hekdesh should not lose out and have less power than a commoner. So that's why the Hekdesh in this case gets 200. And the previous case also gets 200 because there is the payment, right? We saw for Hekdesh, for authority of Hekdesh, money is powerful. The treasurer can buy with coins and acquire something even on the other side of the world. And the same thing with selling. If I didn't pay yet, and I only pulled on it, so the Bet HaMikdash could say, "Oh, well, you didn't pay yet, so it didn't go through yet." So therefore, the Bet HaMikdash goes with the transfer of money. That would be the main thing. Nevertheless, even though the transfer of money is the main thing, and so the Bet HaMikdash benefits in this case, still the Bet HaMikdash should not lose out and be worse than the commoner. So that's why the Bet HaMikdash gets the best of both worlds. Now the order of events is the other way around. I gave the money first, right? I went to a temple treasurer and I gave him 200 for this particular ox because now I'm redeeming it, but I didn't get a chance to actually pull it. And in the meantime, right, by the time I got around to actually pulling on the animal, the price went down and now it's only 100. Still, that 200, I gave it already, and I can't get it back. Right, the 200 sticks. My tamav and natana kesef v'kamlo. As we said before regarding redemption, it's giving of the money. That is what makes the transfer. So that's it. I already bought it. I already redeemed it. And again, because in the authority of the Bet HaMikdash, it's the money that effectuates the transfer in both ways. Now, if I went to the temple treasurer and I gave him $100 for this ox, and now by the time I got around to pulling on it, it went up in price, 200. So in this case, well, we said for authority of Bet HaMikdash, the money is what makes the transfer. So when I gave the 100, that's it, right? It's mine, even though I didn't pull on it yet. And so in this case, what's redeemed is redeemed, and I have to give only 100. So I can benefit in this case, right? Whereas if it was a person, it would not be so. So now we ask, how come we don't give him give the person the worst deal and give the Bet HaMikdash the better deal? In this case also, amai should the power of a commoner should not be more than Hekdesh. And if it was a commoner in this case, and let's say I was just buying it from you, and I gave you $100, but I didn't pull on it yet, and then it went up to 200. So since I didn't pull on it yet, the transaction is not finalized, and you could say, "Don't forget it. In the meantime, it went up in price. You have to give me another 100," and I would have to give another 100 if it was a commoner sale. So how come we don't say the same thing? How come here we go strictly with the rule that for the authority of the Bet HaMikdash, money is what makes a transaction, and that's it. Now, the commoner can benefit, and the answer is atu hejot la b'mishe parakae. If a commoner would do such a thing, would they not get a curse called the mishe parak curse? This is when something is technically legal permitted, but is against the spirit of the law and against the wishes of the chachamim. Is basically an unethical thing to do. So the rabbis say, someone who does this, even though technically it's a valid legal thing to do, we'll give him a curse and say, he, Hashem, who exacted punishment over the generation of the flood, should give punishment to anyone who does this. Well, what is it talking about? If I say, we agree on a price, and I give you $100 for this ox, right? And we agree, and you take the $100, but I didn't pull out and eat yet. And then the price goes up. And now, even though legally you have a right to say, oh, well, you didn't take it yet, therefore, you know what, I renege on the deal, and if you still want it, now you have to pay the new price of $200. Even though you have a legal right to do that, the rabbis say someone who does that should get punished, right? It's not a proper thing to do. It's not an upright and upstanding thing to do. So therefore, if a hejot does it, even though legally it's permitted, we look down upon it. Therefore, we do not apply in this case, lo yehe koach hejot hamur mehekdesh, because since even in a hejot case, we expect the person not to do that, and most people are not going to insist on the price that goes up. Therefore, it's just equal. And so in the case of hekdesh as well, since I already paid the temple treasurer 100, and the payment effectuates the redemption. It is already mine, even though I didn't pull on it yet. And so in that case, we say, well, you paid already. So that effectuated the transaction. And so what? That you didn't pull on it yet. It's already yours. So take it. And the Bet HaMikdash is not losing out anything, because if the same thing was done with a person, also the expectation of the rabbis would be that a person will not then go and raise the price. And so it's actually just the same. All right. Now we come to the next Mishnah, a somewhat famous Mishnah. It's not clear how it's related to what came before, because we're not talking about acquisitions or anything. It seems the main point here is that we're talking about the obligations of a father to his son, and we're going to see one of them is to marry him off. So this might just be related to the topic of Kiddushin. Although others say, well, it's related to the topic of differences between men and women and different classes, as we saw before. So it could be related in that sense also. All right. Kol misvot haben ala'av anashim hayavim ve'nashim peturot. All commandments with regard to a son that are the obligation of a father. This phrase is ambiguous, and I will clarify that this is in fact talking about the obligations that the father has to do for his son. In that case, men, meaning fathers, are obligated. Women, meaning mothers, are exempt. Whereas all commandments of with regard to a father that are placed upon the son, meaning things that a child has to do for a parent, both men and women, meaning both sons and daughters, have to do for their parents. Any positive commandments that time causes them to come into effect, that they are not, the obligation is not present all the time, but at certain times that given time when it arrives triggers the obligation in that commandment, then men are obligated and women are not. Whereas positive commandments that are not dependent on time, both men and women are obligated. Negative commandments, things that one may not do, it doesn't matter whether they are triggered by time or not triggered by time. Both men and women are obligated, except for three. חוץ מבעל תקיף ובעל תשחית ובעל תטמא למתים, except for rounding out the hair of one's head. So that's that would be cutting off the peot, and such that if you did that, then you'd have a rounded haircut that was associated with idolatrous priests. And so only men cannot get a haircut like that, but women are allowed. And cutting the corners of the beard, right here and here, there's different opinions about where it is. And so shaving with a razor, this is with a razor, one can cut one's beard with a scissor, but shaving with a razor directly on the skin in those spots is prohibited to a man. If a woman needs to shave some facial hair, she's permitted to do so, even with a razor. And lastly, becoming tameh lamet, that for a kohen, male kohen cannot become tameh lamet if it's not for a close relative, but a bat kohen, she can become tameh lamet, even for someone who's not a close relative. All right, so now we see all the differences. Now let's analyze the first one. Mai kol mitzvot haben al ha'av. What does that mean? All commandments of a son upon the father. Ilema kol mitzvot demichayev bera lemevad laba nashim peturot. If you say seems like a more straightforward reading, any commandment that a son has to do for the father, like kibud av, you're going to tell me that women don't have to do it? Daughters don't have to, not obligated and mitzvot to do for their parents? Vatanya ish and li ela ish. Now we're looking at the other pasuk. Ish aviv imot tira'u. Says a man has to fear his mother and father. So if I said only ish, I would say fine, a man, male. But isha minayin, how about a daughter? Keshomer ish imo aviv tira'u hare kan shenaim. The continuation is in plural, tira'u. If it really meant only a man, not a woman, it's just a tira. So the plural here teaches me that both men and women, both sons and daughters, are obligated to do things on behalf of their parents. So it can't be talking about that, because then the Mishnah wouldn't be true. Rather, it means all misvot on the son or for the son that are incumbent on the father to do for him, for that son. Only a father has to do, a mother does not have to perform those. Tanena leha. Now we have a braita that explains this Mishnah. De tanu Rabbanan. Ha'av chaya bivno limulo liftoto lelamedo Torah lasyo isha ve'ulelamedo umanut. A father is obligated to circumcise his son. If he's a firstborn to his mother, then he also has to do pidyon haben. The father has to teach the son Torah. He has to marry him off. So here's the key for why all this might be here in Masechet Kiddushin. He also has to teach him an occupation. Some say he has to teach him also how to swim. Rabbi Yehuda is doubling down on the teaching him an occupation, because any father who does not teach his son a trade is teaching him to be a thief. Is it literally he's teaching him how to be a thief? He's showing him how to break locks and put on masks and things? No, it means it's as if he's teaching him banditry, because if he has no way to support himself, he's going to be hungry and homeless. He's going to turn to a life of crime. So therefore, teach him an honest living so he won't have to do that. למולו מן הלן, תכתיב, וימול אברהם את יצחק בנו, ואחד דלה מהלה אבו, מחייבי בידינה למי מהלה, תכתיב עמו ללחם, כל זכר. So how do you know that a father has to do circumcision for his son? Because regarding Abraham, who was first commanded, he is commanded to circumcise his son, Yitzchak. Now, if the father didn't, for whatever reason, maybe he couldn't, maybe he didn't want to, so then the Bet Din has to step in, and they have to get a mohel and have the child circumcised, because we learn that from this pasuk that says it in the passive. In the passive, every male shall be circumcised. So not only the father, but if not the father, then someone has to make sure that they are circumcised. The Bet Din oversees the affairs of the community. And if the Bet Din didn't do it for whatever reason, they didn't realize there's no Bet Din in that town, and this child grows up and now he's bar mitzvah, he realizes, oh, I don't have a brit milah, so he's obligated to have himself circumcised. He has to hire someone and go get himself circumcised. As the pasuk says, any male who's not circumcised, who does not circumcise his flesh, shall be cut off from people. So he has an obligation to make sure that he is circumcised, right? Anyone who does not do his circumcision, so he gets karet. Well, if it was already done when he was a child by his father, then that's fine. But if not, he is responsible for doing it himself. You see that because it says that about the person himself, that he is lo yimol et besar lato. So that means if it's not done for him, he has to do it himself. Now, how do we know that a mother is not obligated to circumcise her child, right? And it could be either she knows how to do it and she does a circumcision, or she, like most men do, hire a mohel to do it, but she would be responsible for seeing to it that her child is circumcised. How do we know that she is not obligated? Because Mishnah said that these are commandments are only upon the father, not the mother. Tichtiv kasher siva oto Elohim oto velo ota. So it says regarding Abraham, Hashem told him, Abraham, go and circumcise your son. It didn't say, and as Hashem told her, there's no commandment to Sarah regarding this. Ashkechan miyad adorot minalan. Fine, that makes sense. In that first generation, Hashem told Abraham to do it. But how do you know that's true for all generations? That's always the father and not the mother. Maybe only in the first generation happened to be Abraham is the first one to do it, and just Sarah was not doing it. But maybe in general, for mothers do. Are obligated. Tana deber bi Ishmael kol makom shemasav eno ela zeruz miyad uldorot. We learned from a braita from the school of Rabbi Ishmael that when it says sav, it says here kasher siva oto. The word sav is telling people that you should make sure to do it. And it applies then and for all generations, so that it's the same, right? The law will apply the same way. So just like in the first generation, it applied to a father Abraham and not to mother Sarah, so too in all generations it applies to a father. Now zeruz zichtiv. Now how do you know that sav is always a language of galvanizing, getting a person excited, go and do it right away? Dichtiv. Because here it says in the same pasuk v'sav, and also says that you should make him strong, encourage him. So zeruz is always a language of encouragement. We see that here it says the word siva, and it says explicitly that this is going to be true from now and forever for all generations. And so therefore, from this hekesh, it says siva regarding this. Anytime it says siva, it also means it's for all generations. Okay, so we learn from here that a mother is not obligated to go and make sure her child is circumcised. Incidentally, a woman can actually be a mohelet. We learn that from Sipporah when Moshe was not circumcising his son. She came in with the flintstone and she did it. So therefore, technically, that's allowed, although we don't see that happen very often. To redeem his son. Minalan dichtiv kol bechor banecha tifter. So how do you know the father has to redeem his son if he is a firstborn from his mother? Because it says all of your firstborn you must redeem. If the father didn't do it, again for whatever reason, is not around, is not able, doesn't want to, then the child, when he grows up, has to redeem himself. The obligation is still there, right? That money is still owed to the Kohen. He still has that holiness of a Bechor that has to be redeemed. So the child can do it himself when he grows up. Now, how do you know that the mother is not also obligated? It could be both are obligated. Someone, the father or the mother, has to go and make sure you do a pidyon haben. Tichtib, tipade, kol shemesuve lifdot et asmo, mesuve lifdot et acherim. V'chol she'eno mesuve lifdot et asmo, eno mesuve lifdot acherim. Since the word tifte, and you can read it both ways. You can read it tifte, and right, you shall redeem, and also tipade, you shall be redeemed. So we learn that we learn an equivalence. Anyone who is commanded to redeem himself, and that's here talking about a son who grows up, he has to redeem himself, will also be obligated to redeem others if he is the father of a bechor. But anyone who is not obligated to redeem himself is not obligated to redeem others. A woman is not commanded to redeem herself, and therefore she is not commanded to redeem her son. Now, how do we know that? How do you know? Maybe a firstborn daughter has to redeem herself when she grows up. תכתיב, תפדה, תיפדה. כל שאחרים מסובין לפתותו, מסווה לפתות את עצמו. וכל שאין אחרים מסובין לפתותו, אין מסווה לפתות את עצמו. So again, we take this equivalence of these two readings of the word, and we say, in any case where someone else is obligated to redeem that person, then that person is also obligated to redeem themselves when they grow up. That is true for a boy, there where says a father is obligated to redeem his son, so that's why the son has to redeem himself if it's not done. But someone where others are not commanded to redeem them, that's true for a daughter, that daughter does not have to redeem herself either when she grows up. And finally, how do you know that a parent doesn't have to do pidyon on a firstborn daughter? So all comes finally down to this, since it says or any firstborn in your sons you have to redeem. So I mean sons and not daughters. Since a father is obligated, we don't know father yet. Let's say we don't know father. Maybe father or mother will say parent. Since a parent is obligated to redeem only a son and not a daughter, therefore a daughter is not required to redeem herself when she grows up. Since she's not required to redeem herself, she's also not required to redeem others, including her own son. And that's how we know that only a father has to do pidyon haben. A mother is not obligated to do pidyon haben on her son. Tenor banan, hu lipadot ubno lipdot. Who kodem libno. Let's say you have a man who he was a firstborn, and his father never did pidyon haben, and now he grows up and has a son of his own, and now he's faced with a situation where he has to do pidyon haben on himself and on his son, but he has limited funds. He only has 5 coins. So what should he do? So the answer is he comes first. He has his own obligation. His obligation to himself takes precedence over that of his son. Right? Put on your own mask first, and only then that on your child. Rabbi Yehuda omer beno kodmo, sheze misvato alabi, veze misvat beno alav. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says, no, the child is first, because with regard to the father, his mitzvah was upon his father, right? The grandfather of the child that was born. And so that takes, that's secondary. Whereas the child that's here, his primary mitzvah is on himself, right? The child is on that child's obligation is on his father, who is himself in this scenario. Therefore, basically saying that the primary obligation of pidyon haben is something that the father has to do for his son. Only secondarily, if that was not done, then the son, when he grows up, does it. Therefore, someone who has to redeem himself and his son has to go redeem his son first, because that's his primary obligation before himself, because the primary obligation for himself was that his father should have done it. So that's a different opinion than Tanakama. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah hakol modin kol echad eleka el chamesh sheleim hu kodem libno ma'ay tama misvad gufe adifa. Now Rabbi Yirmiyah is going to explain his opinion about this braita and say, no, don't read it in a straightforward way. Actually, everyone agrees if there's only 5 coins, then the person does it to himself first, because we have another general rule that mitzvah for himself is takes precedence. The machloket in this baraita is actually talking about a more limited case where there are 5 coins that are liened to someone else. There's a lien on them, meaning that there's a lien on a property that's worth 5 selaim. And that's the property has already been sold. So there's someone out there with that money. If someone has a prior lien to it, then they can go and collect it. But otherwise, it's not available. There's another 5 selaim that are unsold property that he has here in hand and cash. So now there are, in fact, access to the other 5. Can we access those? And it's basically kind of owed to the Kohen, because when someone has to do Pidyon, basically we're saying that they owe the Kohen, and some Kohen, 5 selaim. So can we remove that lien property and give it to the Kohen? So that's the machlok. Since in the Torah it already says you have to do Pidyon haben, that's considered like a written loan document. All right, we didn't have to write a written loan document that says, I owe the Kohen 5 selaim. I don't have to write it. It's already in the Torah. What's better than the authority of a Torah to make it a financial obligation? So, behane chamesh parek libre, vazil Kohen v'taref le lechamesh mishubadim ledideh. So therefore you have an easy solution, that with the 5 that he has available, that guy, this father, should redeem his son. And then the obligation to himself, to redeem himself, well, he was obligated to that Kohen was owed the money from the moment that kid was born. And that was prior to the sale. So therefore the Kohen can go to the buyer of the field that's worth 5 selaim and say, listen, I know you bought the field, but I have a prior lien on it because this guy who sold you the field, he was never redeemed. So he owes a Kohen 5 selaim, hand it over. That's what Rabbi Yehuda meant when he said, Hu kodem libno, that he redeems himself with that liened property, although he also does his son with the available money. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbanan sabre milveh dichti ba'oraita lav kichtuba b'shtar damya hilkar misva dekufe adif. Whereas Rabbanan say, no, you can't call, just because it's written in the Torah that there's a law that you always have to do pidyon haben and give 5 selaim to the Kohen. That doesn't actually create a monetary obligation on his land, on himself, such that his land will be liened. If you want to do that, you have to actually write a document, a loan document, right? A commandment is not the same as a loan document. So the commandment says you have to go do pidyon haben. If your father didn't do it, you have to do it yourself. So you have to go and do it, right? And then, if you do it, then you need money, cash on hand to accomplish that. So you can't use the liened property for that. Therefore, there's only 5 selaim altogether. Since there's only 5 selaim, you have to choose between one or the other, and we choose the person himself, because a person should take care of his own obligation first, the obligation upon himself with the land that or the money that he owns, and the one that is sold and has a lien on it, he cannot use, and that is the topic of the machloket. Tenor banan. לפתות את בנו ולעלות לרגל פודה את בנו ואחר כך עולה לרגל. So if someone has a choice, they can only do one, they only have enough funds for one, to either redeem himself or to go aliyah laregel, to go to Jerusalem for the holiday. We're comparing these two things because they appear together in the same pasuk. So he should redeem himself first, and then, if he has leftover money, then he can go and do aliyah. Rabbi Yehuda omer oled laregel v'achar kach boded beno. Shezo misva obedet, v'zo misva she'ena obedet. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says, go enjoy the holiday, and then eventually, when you can, do pidyon. Why? Because aliyah laregel is the time will pass, right? Pesach is going to be finished, right? Sukkot will be finished. You won't be able to do it. So this is something that takes priority because it happens right away. Whereas the pidyon haben, okay, you're supposed to do it as early as you can, after 30 days. But if you didn't, so you could do it next month. You could do it in 2 months, whenever you get the money, whenever you can. So that way you can end up being able to do both. So we understand according to Yehuda, he gave the reason, right? Because you want to do the one that's pressing right away, and because otherwise you won't be able to do it at all, and then you do pidyon haben that you could do later. But Rabbanan, what's the reason? He doesn't give a reason. Because that's the order in the pasuk. They both appear in the very same pasuk. First it says, do pidyon haben, and then later in the pasuk it says, do not see me empty-handed. Rather, when you come on the holiday, you should bring gifts. And so that's talking about Aliyah Laregel. Tenor Banan. Minayin shim hayu lo chamisha banim mechamesh nashim shachayav lifdot kulan. How do we know that if a person had 5 firstborn boys from 5 different wives, meaning it's not his firstborn, but it's their firstborn, that you have to do Pidyon Haben for all of them? Right? Because it says all the firstborn of your sons, you have to do Pidyon Haben. This is, in fact, the halacha. A lot of times at Pidyon Haben, sometimes someone will get up and speak and say, this is a once-in-a-lifetime mitzvah. Actually, it's not true. It's a once-in-a-lifetime mitzvah only for that marriage of this father and mother. All right, once a mother has a Pidyon, that's it. Then that couple cannot do another Pidyon Haben. But if the father eventually gets remarried, and has a firstborn for her with that one, then he would do Pidyon Haben again. Now we ask, Peshita bepeter rechem talarachamana. We say, isn't this obvious? The whole point, the Torah says, this is a peter rechem, the firstborn from a womb. Therefore, dependent on the mother, right? Anytime it's her firstborn, you're gonna have to do Pidyon Haben. Why do you have to go through and give me find the pasuk for this? Kol bechor. Why do we need that? Mahu detema nelat bechor min hachala amalan reshit ono afkan reshit ono kamash malan. Because I might have thought maybe we should make a gezerah shava, firstborn and firstborn, from inheritance. Regarding inheritance, this is the first of his strength. For inheritance, there's only one firstborn of a father, right? His firstborn son gets double. And it doesn't matter if he has 2 wives or 3 wives and there's firstborns from each of them. It's whoever he sired first gets the double portion, and not all the firstborn that was born from him second, even though it was the firstborn from the mother. And so, but I might have thought I should make a gezerah shava and say for Pidyon Haben also it's his firstborn. So that's why I asked the teacher, teach me kol bechor b'neftifteh. You do Pidyon Haben for every single one of the firstborn from its mother. Le'lamedo Torah. On the list of the Braita is that a father has to teach his son Torah. Min delan dichtib ve'limedetem otam et benechem. How do we know that? Because the pasuk in Shema says you have to teach your children. Now, if a person's father did not teach him Torah and he grows up, well, he has to teach himself. He can't say, well, my father never taught me, so I can be ignorant. No, he has to teach him himself, because the same letters, it can be read velimadetem, to teach, or it can also be ulmadetem, to learn. So if you were not taught, you have to learn. How do we know that a mother is not obligated to teach her son Torah? Dichtib velimadetem ulmadetem kol shemesuve lilmod mesuve lelamed v'kol she'eno mesuve lilmod eno mesuve lelamed. Just like we had this exercise similarly before, since it says the word and you can vocalize it as teach or learn, so we make a comparison between them. Anyone who is obligated to learn is obligated to teach, but anyone who's not obligated to learn themselves is not obligated to teach. So, since a woman is not obligated to learn, she is not obligated to teach her son. So now the next step, how do you know that a woman is not obligated to learn Torah herself? Dichtib v'limadetem ulmadetem, also from the same 2 readings that we make equivalent. Kol she'acherim mesuvin lamedo mesuve lelamed et asmo, v'kol she'en acherim mesuvin lelamedo en mesuve lelamed et asmo. So we learn from there that anyone where someone else is commanded to teach that person has to teach themselves. Whereas if other people are not obligated to teach them, then they don't have to teach themselves. And so a father has to teach his child, his son. Therefore, a son has to learn when he grows up. But a parent does not have to teach his or her daughter, and therefore the daughter does not have to learn when she grows up. Now, how do you know that no one is obligated to teach a daughter, right? Not a father, even. So it goes back to this, to teach your son and not daughter. So to go backwards, only a son needs to be taught, not a daughter. Therefore, only a son needs to teach himself if his father didn't teach him, and therefore only a father is obligated to teach his son, and the mother is not obligated to teach her son. Da Tanura Banan. Hu lilmod ubeno lilmod. Hu kodem libno. Now, similar to the exercise we said before, what if you have a choice and either I learn myself or my son goes to learn? I only have enough, money for one teacher, or someone has to go to work, or whatever. All right, so who comes first? The person himself is obligated before going to and teaching and having his son taught. The Biuda says, well, it depends. If the son is diligent and sharp and he's going to keep his learning, then if the son has more talent and will grow better, so then the son takes precedence. Kiha de Rav Yaakov, bere de Rav Aha bar Yaakov, shedare abu. Lekamed Abaye. Ki ata chazye de lahava mechadedin shemate. So, for example, Rav Yaakov, the son of Rav Acha, the son of Yaakov, his father sent him to go study before Abaye. So he went and studied with him for a while, and he saw that the child is not his learning is not sharp. So Amale Ana Difa Minach Tubat de Zil Ana. I see you have ADD. You're not comprehending and remembering the learning. You know what? Better that I go and you stay home. I will go and study. So you learn. That's an example, right? It says even though. If the child was better, then the child would go. But if not, then he should go himself, because that he is more important than his one is more important. Is more obligated than his son. Shema Abaye deka hava'ate. Now Abaye, who was a teacher there, heard that Rav Acha bar Yaakov is coming to the yeshiva himself. He's not sending his son anymore, and he was known as a great tzaddik. Havahu mezik be Rabbanan Abaye techi havu aile betren afilu bimama havu mitazeke. And now in the study hall of Abaye, there was a demon, and it was so powerful, it was harming people. When two people would enter, they would be harmed, even during the day. Usually demons don't attack during the day, only at night, and only when someone's attacking alone. But this one didn't follow the rules of demons, and wouldn't behave himself and was attacking people, and no one can control it. So Abaye said to the townspeople, nobody host him. Don't bring him to his house. That way, he'll have nowhere to sleep except in the Beit Midrash. And so he'll spend the whole night in the Beit Midrash, and the demon surely will come. Even this demon comes out more at night. And then, who knows, maybe a miracle will occur, and Rav Acha bar Yaakov will be attacked by the demon, but he will slay the demon, and that will save us all. So Abaye is setting up Rav Acha here. Anyway, al bat abehahu berabanan. So Rav Acha came and he spent the night in the berabanan, in the study hall. Idamele ketanina deshiva resh vata. And the demon came and took the appearance, I guess it could have different appearances, of a 7-headed serpent. Kol kiryat netan had reshe. Rav Acha, he was praying, and every time he bowed down, one of the heads would fall off. Amar lehu lemachar, ilai trechesh nisa sakintin. Rav Acha next day got upset. If not that a miracle had occurred, you would have placed me in danger, right? You used me for this purpose. So look, it turned out all right, but we don't like to rely on miracles. Now, if a person has a dilemma, he doesn't know what to do first. Should he learn Torah first or get married first? On the one hand, you want to be able to learn Torah while you don't have to worry about taking care of a wife and of home and children, and you don't have that burden of having to go to work to provide for a wife and household. So therefore, you might say better to learn Torah first. On the other hand, as a young man gets older, it's difficult to be single and to control his urges. And so we say maybe better to have a wife. And that way, right, you don't have to think about who I'm dating, what's going to happen. You have a wife, that's all finished. He can control his desires, and then he can study Torah better. So it's a real dilemma. So the answer is Yilmod Torah v'achar kach yisa isha. Best best to learn Torah, concentrate on Torah studies, and then push off, and then eventually, when you have all that Torah under your belt, then you go and get married. However, but if a person, he can't withstand his urges, and he can't live without a wife, so then go and marry first, and then find a way while you're married to continue to learn Torah. Practical advice, right? Depends on the person. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shemuel, Halacha nosei isha v'achar kach yilmod Torah. Shemuel, who lived in Bavel, said the proper way to go is that one should get married first and then learn Torah after, right? Have your know who you're going to marry, have her be married, and take care of the Yetzer Hara, and then you can learn Torah better. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chaim v'Savaro v'Yasok b'Torah. Rabbi Yochanan, who's from Eretz Yisrael, says, what do you mean if a person has a millstone around his neck, meaning the obligation, the responsibility to provide for his wife or his family, he's going to feel the pressure all the time to have to go to work. How's he going to sit and be able to concentrate on Torah? Therefore, no, don't do that. Just study Torah first and push off marriage till later. They're not actually disagreeing with each other because they live in different countries, and this is for us and that's for them. In Bavel, there was a different type of economy, and so a person could get married and his wife would go and get a job and provide, and he can continue to learn Torah, and that was fine. Whereas in Eretz Yisrael, it didn't work that way. In Eretz Yisrael, the man would have to go provide. So then, how's he going to be able to study Torah? So therefore, study Torah first. That's one explanation. There's different explanations about the differences between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel, but since the situation was different in each, so each answer applies to each one. So basically, we have to do what is practical in one's given condition and atmosphere. Now, further on, the benefits of getting married young, as they did in Bavel. Mishtabach le Rav Chisda Rav Huna de Rav Hamnuna Tadam Gadol Hu. Rav Chisda used to tell Rav Huna that Rav Chisda used to tell Rav Huna about Rav Hamnuna. Tell him that he's a great man. So Rav Huna says, well, when he comes to you, I'd like to meet him, right? Come, bring him to me so I can meet this great man that you speak of. So one day he did come, and Rav Huna sees that he doesn't cover his head with a cloth, like the Torah scholars would cover their heads, kind of like today when some people cover their heads with a talit when they're praying, a sign of piety. He sees he's not doing that. So he says, how come you don't cover your head with a cloth to show your extra piety if you're a great man? Because I'm not married. This seems to be the origin of the custom that for Ashkenazim do not wear a talit because they're not married. I mean, talit atef is we wrap our heads, and so associated with that. So he says, I'm not married, so I'm not. Even though he might be great in Torah, if he's not married, he's not going to do this custom of covering his head. So Rav Huna turns his face away from him and says, I don't want to see you again till you get married. Right? In other words, stop this. You have to get married young. It's important. It's better to be married, and you'll still continue to learn Torah. But being married, that way you don't have to think about that. You will allay your Yetzer Hara. Not as a punishment, don't see me again, but as encouragement to just go and find a wife. Rav Huna was following what is his general opinion, because he says if someone's already 20 years old and still not married, then his days will all be in sin, because he won't be able to control his actions and his thoughts. And so one should get married better earlier, latest 20. Now, does it mean really aveda? He's really going to go around and do illicit sexual relations? No, it means that he's going to have thoughts of sin. So in order to avoid even the thoughts of sin, better to get married younger. Amarava v'chen tana deber Rabbi Ishmael ad 20 shana yoshev b'kadosh baruch hu mesapeh l'adam matai yisa isha kevan shegi'a 20 v'lo nasa omer tipach asmotav. And we have Rava says is also a baraita from the school of Rabbi Ishmael that says until a person is 20 years old, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits and waits. So when's he going to get married? I hope he's going to get married. Hashem is rooting him on. Right, go and find someone. He gets to 20 and still is not married. Hashem loses his patience. It says, let that person's bones swell. They're angry at him, right? I'm hoping for you. I was rooting for you. That's it. You still can't find anybody. It still means you're not motivated to do so. And you know what? Hashem gives up on that person. Amar Rav Chisda, Hai de'adifna mechaverai de'zasibna b'shitza. Rav Chisda also praised the value of getting married younger. He says, I'm superior to my colleagues because I got married when I was 16. And if only I would have gotten married at 14, I could have said to Satan, an arrow in your eye, meaning that he would have been able to overcome his Yetzer Hara totally. The idea is unlike Christianity, where to overcome one's desires should be, totally be celibate and sublimate your physical self and be only spiritual, which basically doesn't work. Torah instead says channel one's base desires to holiness of marriage and building a family, and that way everything's good, right? All that urge is directed towards something good, towards holiness, and then he doesn't have to worry about the Yetzer Hara tempting him to do anything that is illegal or immoral. Amar leRav leRabbi Natan bar Amea diadach al savere debrich mishitzar vad esrim vetartev amri la mitemane sere ad esrim ve'arba'a. Further advice in this regard, Rava said to Rabbi Natan bar Amea, while you still have control over your son's neck, meaning while he's still young, go and marry him off, find him a wife. All right, how old? Some say between 16 and 22 years old. Some say between 18 and 24 years old. That's the ideal time. And the two opinions over here regarding how old one should marry off his child is parallel a Tanaitic dispute as well, as when it says train a child in the way that he should go. These two Tanaim disagreed about the age that is best for a parent to instruct the child. One says, talking about from 16 to 22 years old, and the other says from 18 to 24. And so that time then when a father should marry off his son is equal to the time when a father should teach his son. That's the age when formative years, when a father has a lot of influence and can direct the child to making good decisions and to being educated. So that's a father's obligation. We think of parents' obligation when the kids are little, right? But when they get big, actually, according to this, that's even a bigger responsibility to make sure that they are making the right decisions and learning the right ways. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.